Today, from scratch, I'm going to step through getting a Hasura API GraphQL instance running against SQL Server. So like a completely clean repo so that we could start from scratch with SQL Server. So first things first, getting a Docker container with SQL Server running alongside a Hasura API so that we can connect it and then work from that. So first things first, I'm going to bounce into my directory here. Let's see here. Let's call it, go into my repos. We're going to call it, let's see, we're going to go into Hasura coding baseline. What is this one? Did I put anything in there? Yes. That's not what we're going to use. So let's hear make dir Hasura local dev SQL server. Local dev SQL server. There we go. So we've got that. Now in this directory, we are going to go ahead and let's do git init. Then we are going to add a git ignore file. I'm going to add that. And then put in some simple basics to start off with. Let's get .ds store to keep the Mac files out, and let's get .ida. Whenever I start using any JetBrains IDEs, that'll keep those default files out, and that's it for the moment. Then I'm also going to create a readme.md. I'm going to create a license. And what else do we need? We need, okay, we get initted, got some of the basic files. Then let's do Hasura init to get a basic migration directory structure set up. So in that, we now have our config YAML metadata migrations and seeds for our local environment so that we can keep up with metadata and all that good jazz. More on that in a minute. And I'm going to navigate back out here one level down from that. And we have our basic files, and then I want to add one more file. And what I'm going to add is the initial docker-compose file, which I always do, docker quick start Hasura, which you can see from my default search there. Go in there to this page. I'm going to scroll down, and right here is the wget and the path for the YAML file. So it's out there on the GraphQL engine at this location, and it's basically kept up in a way. There we go. So let's go back over to code. It's kept up in a way where it has latest Postgres and the latest versioned iteration of the GraphQL engine from Hasura. So we got all that. It's on port 8080. It's got a basic database connection string for that Postgres server. The console is enabled, so we can get into that. And it's set to dev mode, and then it's got the enabled log types. Sets up a basic data volume for Postgres. Whoops, bouncing all over the place there. Right here, as you can see. Up here, we're just going to leave this Postgres password as Postgres password. And then there's our DB volume, restart set to always, and that should be good for initial start. However, I always add ports for Postgres, which is 5432, mapped to 5432. I always open up the ports because I like to be able to connect directly to the database if I want to later. Not necessary to get things started. But with that file now, I can open up our Visual Studio Code terminal nothing running, and no orphaned containers. So now we're ready to get this going. So with the new command, we don't have to do docker-compose anymore. It's in the underlying root docker CLI command. So it's docker-compose up-d so that it detaches and runs the containers. So let's hear. All right, it's setting up a network. It's going to call it Hasura local dev SQL Server blah, blah, blah. And then it's adding the volume, that DB data directory, and then it starts the 2 instances, and it looks like we're up and running. So if I now go out to, let's see here, and then look at localhost, we should see the console at 8080, which is exactly what we want. So it might take a second just because various containers are still starting up. They don't always start instantly. So I'm going to let that think for a minute. We're going to go in here. And now it's time to get started adding our SQL Server container instance that will pull from one of the latest SQL Server images to spin up, and then we'll get connected to that one. We're going to go in here. We're going to leave the Postgres instance. We will need it to stay, as that is still used for the metadata. So I'm going to add SQL Server. We'll add a container name. Let's call it SQL Server Database. Then image. And the image I'm going to use is the mcr.microsoft. I don't know what those autocompletes are, but they're not what I want. MS SQL Server. And then it's going to be the 2019 GA Ubuntu 16.04. Whoa. Please don't autocomplete for me. I am happy with 16.04. There we go. So that's the image. I'm going to set it to restart always. Then we're going to open up these ports too. And in SQL Server, that's going to be 1433 to 1433. Again, we'll be able to connect directly to our SQL Server instance if we so choose. There are some environment variables that we have to have per the way these containers are set up, specifically for SQL Server. One is accepting the EULA. So that's the license agreement. I will let you investigate what that license involves overall yourself. I won't go into elaborations there, but it is somewhat important to know what your license is based on how that works. Then we're going to use MSSQL1 as the password, then NSSQL_PID, and we're going to be using Express. Now, one of the things about Express is that it's the free version of SQL Server. Do note that the versions of SQL Server can be extremely different in price, i.e. super expensive or free. This one's free. It's set up so that you have one database instance within the server running. It serves all the purposes of this demo, and it can serve development and other needs very easily. There are multiple different versions of SQL Server, some which are set up to connect to all the tertiary ecosystem of SQL Server, such as reporting services and things like that. SQL Express doesn't always connect to all of those particular things, has certain other limitations or things that are not particularly limited, but not exactly set up for those tertiary capabilities. So if you're not sure which version you want, definitely go out and check the different versions, see what has what. Microsoft has different feature grids that will tell you which one has what features and all that kind of jazz. You can figure out what you want, look at the licensing, figure out what you do or don't want to pay for, and then choose that. For local dev, it almost doesn't matter. You can use whatever version you want to, or not whatever version, but whatever variant of it you want to, and you can enter it in right here. Either Express, Developer, Enterprise, Super Duper Enterprise, all whatever they are. So that's that. And this should be everything that we need for our initial launch. So must be a string. So let's try docker compose up-d. Okay, so the docker compose doesn't work, but the old docker compose works. So now we have all three of the instances up and running. So now there's another change. We're going to need to add the connection string, at least in the way that I like to add the connection string.